Good morning, everyone. It's good to see you all here today. Welcome to today's breakout session on MICIP, the Michigan Integrated Continuous Improvement Process. Welcome to those of you who are in the room with us, as well as to our colleagues in the 4 other breakout rooms today. My name is Ben Borkel. I currently serve as the MICIP lead for professional learning, and with me today is Terry Nugent, the MICIP overall lead. Our goal today is to share with you an overview of MICIP and the process that all districts will engage in beginning in spring 2021. While we know that many of you want to know exactly how the platform will work, we are currently in the middle of that design process and are not yet ready to share that information at this time. We're hoping that by focusing on the mindset and the process now, we will create readiness for when the platform is released. We will be sharing platform information through multiple professional learning opportunities beginning in fall of 2020. It's also important to note that the screenshots you will see in the process section are where we currently are at in the process of development. And as we continue to develop MICIP, we will also continue to gather feedback from our ISD, ESA, and district partners so that the final product may look slightly different. We know that some of you have already heard some of the initial mindset information. Please use this as a time to confirm your knowledge. But we also wanted to make sure that those who are hearing it for the first time have a context for the information about the process. For those for whom this is the first exposure, there is a much deeper overview and mindset presentation on the MICIP website, complete with PowerPoint, narration, and notes. You may wish to view that when you have an opportunity. Because we want to ensure consistency in our messaging each time we present this, as well as because of our large audience today, we will be presenting this information using a script rather than using a more interactive format. As such, we will be not taking questions during the presentation, but in just a minute, I will explain how you can get your questions answered. Finally, we are sharing this PowerPoint with you today through the Sched app because we wanted you to be able to see it on your device, should you choose to do that. However, that being said, we will also be taking it down after the conference so that we can ensure it is ADA compliant and also so that we can update it as we further develop MICIP. And once we have done that, we will be reposting it so that you can have full access. To make asking questions as easy as possible, we are asking you to log into slido.com. There are directions for doing so on your tables. Once there, use the password 2019 conference. Once you do so, you should come to this screen where you can submit questions and comments by typing them in and hitting send. While we will not be directly answering these during the session today, we will be using them to formulate a question and answer document that we will be making available. At the end of the PowerPoint, we will also be sharing our contact information in case you have questions in the meantime. So, where are you relative to your own understanding of and attitude toward continuous improvement? Take a minute to think about that. Which of these pictures come closest to representing your current reality? The Michigan Integrated Continuous Improvement Process, or MICIP, is a pathway for districts to improve student outcomes by assessing whole child needs, to develop plans, and coordinate funds. This is what MICIP is at its core. Needs, plans, and funds are the core of MICIP. Let's start with the why. Why MICIP? First, we have a great sense of urgency. We know that we are not currently getting the results that we need to achieve, and we need to do better. We have received feedback from our ISD, ESA, and district partners about the current school and district improvement process, and we know that educators find several challenges. They have told us that the process is time-consuming, leaving them very little time to focus on the real work of improving student learning. When we asked for suggestions, what we heard was that districts wanted a continuous process of improvement that informs the way they work on a daily basis rather than it being an annual event or a way to simply meet compliance requirements. We want everyone involved in the life of the school to see their work in MICIP every day. They want improvement processes that are integrated rather than isolated. A process that considers systems thinking to support high-quality implementation of actions as well as the actions themselves. More equitable opportunities, environments, and supports that result in better outcomes for all students. They want a process that helps us understand the whole child through factors that influence academic achievement as well as academics themselves. They want data, resources, and tools that are both connected and streamlined. And they want plans that consider both assets and needs. Based on this feedback, we began to talk about a process that was streamlined and integrated, about a platform that would integrate data, resources, and tools to assist districts with this process, and we came to realize that we would need to begin with a shift in mindset. When we talk about MICIP at the highest level, we are referring to these three big ideas: a mindset, a process, and a platform. Let's briefly walk through each of these areas in more detail. Mindset is a shift in thinking where continuous improvement is constant, with smaller cycles of improvement embedded into the larger cycle. And the whole child and systems thinking are at the forefront. Let's briefly look at each of these. With continuous improvement, we're talking about the same process for all rather than separate processes for districts and schools. We are also talking about a process that is ongoing rather than being an annual event, one that starts with looking at data in the spring and ends with a submission of the plan. In addition, plans should reflect what is going on in our classrooms on a daily basis, not documents that are written to be put on a shelf and have no connection to the ongoing work of the district or school. The second area of the mindset focus is on the whole child. Michigan has adopted a definition of the whole child as being a unique learner comprised of interacting dimensions such as cognitive, physical, behavioral, social, and emotional. In the past, we have focused primarily on the academic or cognitive aspect of the child. We now realize the importance of addressing the physical, behavioral, social, and emotional aspects as well, because they impact the child's environment and ability to fully participate in learning. We also realize the importance of involving all stakeholders, including the home, school, and community. By addressing all of these, we come closer to the goal of having children who are healthy, safe, engaged, supported, and challenged. The model we use to reference the whole child is shown on this slide. It is often referred to as the WISC model, which is an acronym for the phrase whole school, whole community, whole child. The WISC model was developed nationally through collaboration among education and public health practitioners. It's a broad framework for addressing both academic and non-academic needs of students in an integrated approach. Let's briefly take a look at the individual components of this model. First, notice that the child is in the center and the focal point. We want each child to perform at the highest levels on all measures of student outcomes. And as an academic-focused institution, we consider both the academic and non-academic factors that impact student achievement. The 5 tenets surrounding the child are the ultimate goal, the what we want for all children that are necessary to maximize positive student outcomes. And in reality, these are also the characteristics of a healthy adult. Before those tenets can be achieved, we need to address the how. To support and achieve those outcomes, we need to have high-quality systems in place that address policies, processes, and practices in both learning and health. We will briefly touch on those systems in the next few slides. This support also includes critical physical and emotional health components and supports represented by the blue circle. We sometimes refer to these as the non-academic areas. These components can also serve as some of the root cause factors negatively impacting student success. By addressing these factors, we can frequently positively impact other areas of student success. Whereas in the past, goals primarily focused on academic areas, it's possible that goals may now be focused on non-academic areas if they are determined to be the root cause. But the school district cannot and should not address these by itself. Rather, it needs the support of the entire community by bringing strategic community members and parents to the table in the entire framework and process. We have briefly described the whole child from the center of the circle to the outside. School health practitioners frequently describe this model from the outside coming in. So if as a district you don't know where to begin the conversation around the whole child, here are some things to consider. First, to what extent does the district leadership and the continuous improvement team understand the concept of the whole child, or the WISC model? Who is represented on your continuous improvement team? Do you have representatives from non-academic areas as well as those representing academics? Not only what academic data do you have, but also what non-academic data do you have and use. The third area of the mindset shift involves systems thinking. We define systems as a series of interdependent and aligned processes and people working together toward a common goal to bring desired results. All too often, we become so focused on narrow challenges, solutions, or opportunities that we forget about how things are connected. The challenge or opportunity we see may be the result of something somewhere else, or addressing one part of the challenge or opportunity without addressing the ripple effects on other parts may not lead to a satisfactory outcome. Some key descriptors in our definition are worth noting. First, interdependent means that processes and people cannot function at their highest levels without each other. Aligned and toward a common goal means that processes and people must be focused on the same thing, and everyone must clearly understand that goal. There are several examples of systems. We can have a system of organizations. In the educational setting, this can refer to the various levels of the educational cascade, including the classroom, grade level or department, school, district, the intermediate school district or regional service agency, the Department of Education, and the community. Somewhat of a vertical alignment. For such a system to be successful, the various levels need to be interdependent and need to work together toward a common goal. We can also have a system of stakeholders within an educational setting, more of a horizontal alignment. Each of these stakeholders has a role in supporting the systems and subsystems identified in the next slide. And as before, we ask ourselves to what extent all stakeholders interact with each other and are aligned to each other in working toward that common goal. This slide shows just a few examples of systems and subsystems, each of which have their own people and processes that support the strategies and activities described in the Continuous Improvement Plan. Each of these pieces could be considered systems in themselves, but they also are subsystems of a larger system. One of the theories of action driving MICIP is the belief that one reason we have not realized the results we had hoped for from the continuous improvement process is that while districts have implemented many actions, the systems necessary to support them haven't necessarily been in place at all, haven't been consistently implemented, or are not aligned. We believe that unless a district can put systems in place to support the chosen strategies, they might need to consider doing something different. These are also some of the systems that are represented by that white ring in the whole child model that must be in place to support children so they can develop characteristics represented by the tenets. Michigan has developed tools to help in the identification of data around the extent to which systems such as these are implemented, including the District Systems Review, the MTSS Practice Profile, and the Blueprint and the Evidence of Practice. Districts that are Advanced Ed or Cognia accredited use the Advanced Ed Cognia diagnostics. So again, if you don't know where to begin the conversation around systems, here are some things to consider. Does the district have a definition or a framework for systems? Does it have data to show to what extent systems are in place and how effective they are? Who is represented on the continuous improvement team? Do they represent the various systems needed to support continuous improvement work? And as you reflect on these systems, are these roles represented on your continuous improvement team? And as you think about the amount of continuous improvement you have experienced in your setting in the recent past, how might the presence or lack of systems have impacted those results? We've been considering mindset, continuous improvement, whole child, and systems. Following mindset, the second broad area of MICIP is the process. Process includes the Michigan Continuous Improvement Cycle depicted in the graphic you see here. We sometimes say that the Continuous Improvement Cycle operationalizes the MICIP process, or needs, plans, funds. It's important to recognize that the continuous improvement cycle occurs within the vision, mission, and beliefs of the district. And it captures the cycle of assessing needs, developing plans, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation, all focused around the whole child at the center. As you compare the old cycle with the new cycle, what do you notice? What's the same? What's different? You might notice that gather and study have been combined into assess needs. One of the ways that MICIP will benefit the user is to simply share back data that has already been collected, either through My School data or through the data hubs, thereby allowing more time to be spent on high-quality analysis and planning rather than on data collection. The old do stage has been broken out into implement, monitor, and evaluate. The cycle represents the ongoing continuous improvement process of monitor, adjust, evaluate, adjust, a part of the cycle that frequently has not been as rigorous as it needs to be. The focus is no longer just on student achievement, rather it considers all aspects of the child. And again, the cycle is explicitly contextualized within the district vision, mission, and beliefs. As in just a minute we walk through the process, you will find some things that look very familiar, while others look new. And even for some of those familiar things, there is a new intentionality, a new depth that previously may have been missing. And finally, the MICIP platform will be a streamlined, web-based application allowing districts to engage in continuous improvement with those integrated tools and resources. It's intended to do two things. First, to facilitate conversation around the elements of continuous improvement, and to provide a space for district teams to make their thinking visible around continuous improvement that eventually will lead to the development of that continuous improvement plan. And in doing this, the MICIP platform will provide a clean, easy-to-use, intuitive space for districts to focus on needs, plans, and funds. So we spent a few minutes reviewing the three components of MICIP. How would you describe them to someone who is new to the work? What role does each play? And how do you see your current organization reflecting these? I'd like you to take maybe 3 minutes with an elbow partner or so and just to have a conversation around the questions on this screen.
So with a recent conversation with superintendents in the area, I've been asked many times, what can we do to get ready for next year? And so we proposed this in terms of the MICIP process. Before we engage in the continuous improvement process, it's important for us to take an inventory by answering these questions. What are we currently doing? What goals are we achieving? And what goals are we not achieving? Taking this inventory helps to identify our current state. And by doing that, we'll begin to get the process ready for MICIP. When we enter the MICIP process for the first time, we most likely enter through the assessing needs process. I realize there's a lot on this slide, and when you get this is a great slide to put when you are working with your continuous improvement to help look at those stages of assessing needs. There are 7 steps that we're recommending for this. But before you jump into the data, you might want to choose a place to begin. You might explore topics that are related to the district's mission, vision, improvement of or strategic planning, using a variety of resources. Use prior knowledge to connect to the previous improvement plans and areas of inquiry. Wonder and ask questions around educational needs of the whole child. Consider both a strength-based approach so that you can consider your root cause of success, as well as an area where you may want to improve. It is also be helpful to decide on which data protocol to use if your district does not already have a preferred protocol. The MICIP resources will offer several suggestions. You might also benefit from having someone facilitate the process for you. When you enter the whole child data discovery area, you will find that you enter through one of three categories: academic data, non-academic data, and systems data. Each of these will be broken down into subcategories. State-level data will be pre-populated, and if you are a part of the data hubs, any data already fed into the hubs will also be pre-populated. Having this data already pre-populated should lead to a significant time savings that will also allow you to spend more time in data analysis. While it is likely that you will enter through one of these three categories, we hope you eventually look at data in all three ways. It is also likely that you will need to consider data that is not collected in My School Data or the hubs. Districts may choose to begin with pre-made data sets, or they may build their own from scratch. For the purpose of today's presentation, you will notice that we are using literacy as our example. So, here we go. During the data discovery process, you will be able to see various representations of the data. You will also be able to add your own data. During this process, you will be looking for patterns and trends, identifying any additional data that you may need, and eventually writing a summary of your data story. Once you have summarized your data, you will engage in two other processes that will eventually lead to a summary of your data story. The initial inventory: what are you currently doing to address the data summarized during your data discovery? 2, a gap analysis. Given what your data says, how far are you from where you want to be, or how close are you getting there? Are you satisfied with your current status, especially if you're just beginning to address a challenge? Are you behind, or might feel you need to consider enhancing what you're currently doing, or consider doing something else? When you are finished with each segment, you'll be asked to write a final summary of your story. This will describe your current state. Prior to moving through the rest of the process, you may find yourself creating multiple data stories based on a variety of data points. While the process so far allows us to describe what the data says, we also need to find time to describe why the data is what it is. To figure that out, we engage in a root cause analysis process. This process has been embedded into the MICIP. One of the theories of action behind MICIP is that one reason why we have not seen the results we want is that our plans have primarily addressed causal theories or our best guesses, rather than taking time to dig more deeply to get to the why. The MICIP resources will have suggestions for multiple tools to use for root cause analysis, as well as suggestions for how to choose the one that is best to analyze your data story. At this point, the 5 why processes is embedded directly into MICIP, and eventually there will be others, or there may be links to outside resources. You will also have a chance to add your own resource. It is important that as part of the root cause analysis, we focus on things over which we have control. Is it possible that we may end up with multiple root causes and may end up having to prioritize which one to address first? It's also possible that root cause processing may identify non-academic factors or systems as root cause factors. If you're using an appreciative inquiry approach, you are looking at root causes as a reason for your success. Once we have reached a preliminary conclusion regarding our analysis, it is also important to check back to see if our conclusions relate to our initial question, and also whether we need any other data to validate our findings. Once we have considered all of these things, You'll be briefly summarizing your conclusions. To complete the assessing needs process, you'll ask to write a challenge or an opportunity for a growth statement. You may also consider that this opportunity for growth, in other words, what is it that we want to address in our plans? And as a reflection, we have a couple of questions we'd like to take a few minutes with your elbow partner to consider. As we think about assessing needs process in MICIP, how does it align with our current process? How might we engage in a root cause process to help identify what we need to address? And secondly, how would we consider systems and whole child data to impact this process? So please take a couple of minutes and discuss this with your table partners.
So once we have completed the assess needs process, we move into the planning process. Before you begin to write your plan, you will again want to ask yourself, now that we have narrowed the focus to this challenge or opportunity, what, if anything, have we already been doing to address this? Earlier, you did your initial inventory. Now that you've narrowed the focus a bit, we're asking you to revisit that. So if you're doing something, how is it going? Might it need to be adjusted? Or does it need to be abandoned? If you're doing nothing, or if previous efforts have been abandoned, now what will you do? As with assess needs, this is an overview of the entire plan process. And again, as Terry mentioned, if you're looking for a screen capture, this is a good one because it outlines all of the steps. But we'll review each of these steps individually. So first of all, we'll begin with writing a measurable goal. Now, in contrast to the current process, we are no longer writing both a goal and a measurable objective. We are only writing a smarter goal, one that is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-defined, engaging, and resourced. And in keeping with the concept of continuous improvement, it's the district that gets to determine the timelines. You may have 6-month to a year goals. You may have 2 to 3 year goals. It's up to you. When writing our goal, it's also critical to identify both the long-term and interim targets against which we will measure improvement so that we'll know whether we are being successful. When identifying how we will measure or how we will address our measurable goal, it's important, again, to answer 2 key questions. First, what is the right thing to do, and can we do it the right way? We will be choosing the right thing from the strategy bank that will be embedded into MICIP and has been pre-populated with evidence and research-based strategies from a variety of reputable sources. And not only will the bank have the strategies, it will also have the evidence or the research, as well as a description of what it means to implement in a high-quality way. So in contrast to the current process, no longer will you have to go decide what research says or what evidence says. That should be provided for you right in the strategy bank. No longer will you have to spend a lot of time identifying what a particular practice looks like in practice. That will be described for you in the strategy bank as well. So once a district chooses a strategy that appears right for addressing the challenge or opportunity for improvement, it still needs to answer whether it can be done the right way. The Hexagon tool from the National Implementation Research Network, or NIRN, one of our development partners, can help us answer that question by addressing characteristics such as need, fit, capacity, sufficiency of resources, and other areas shown on this screen. It can also help a district decide what needs to be done to create readiness for implementation, as well as how to sequence the actual implementation. If when identifying the current state on these categories, a district finds that it is well situated or can fill any existing gaps, it can then move ahead with the strategy it has chosen. However, if a district finds that it is not well situated and or cannot fill the gaps, it might want to consider choosing a different strategy. So many plans with great potential end up not being successful because we simply jump into them before all these areas have been considered. Like the current process, we will need to include activities that support strategy implementation. These activities may include those to help get ready for implementation, such as professional learning, purchasing materials, creating implementation guides, or placing staff, to implementation itself, including frequency and intensity of implementation, as well as how supports will be tiered to meet the needs of all students. It could also include building the systems to support strategy implementation if those are not already in place. One of the most critical components of the plan, and one that frequently has been missing in the past, is identifying the monitoring processes, procedures, and timelines. Our research has shown that gaps in this area, not necessarily so much in planning for monitoring as in the actual monitoring itself, is one of those things that has contributed to the lack of success in our current plans. And as before, it is critical that we monitor both the fidelity of implementation as well as our interim impact targets. Our goal is that eventually the MICIP system will send out monitoring notices based on the identified timelines. Another goal is that monitoring conversations be part of almost every staff meeting. Those should form the core conversations when we get together as teams or staff members. How will we fund the plan? A key component of MICIP is funds, as evidenced by the definition of the process. Needs drive plans to coordinate funds. Frequently, districts have started with their available funds, written a plan to use those funds, and then tried to match them with a need. MICIP tries to turn that scenario around. In MICIP, we first identify the needs, write a plan to address them, and then blend and braid funds to support the plan. Some districts have used their least restrictive funds first, while leaving more of their restrictive funds on the table. It's critical that not only do we know what funds we have, but that we also know how to wisely spend them to maximize their use. Eventually, we hope that MICIP will also allow a district to monitor its spending directly through the platform. The role of funding also points out how critical it is to have your district finance person as part of your continuous improvement team. Especially since the inclusion of the whole child and systems should mean the involvement of more stakeholders, it will be critical that they're kept in the information loop regarding both the plan itself as well as progress on implementation and impact. Not only will MICIP help identify communication methodologies, it will eventually be able to produce the actual reports, whether those be for compliance purposes or simply for information. One of the biggest complaints about the current process is the bulk of the plans. The MICIP platform is intended to produce a variety of plans for a variety of audiences, from simple one-page summaries to supporting documents such as a professional learning plan, a finance plan, or a monitoring plan. Any information relevant to the consolidated application put into MICIP will also feed into the MEG system so that information will only have to be entered once. In the case of the consolidated application, it's likely that some additional information will need to be added to that from MICIP to complete the application in MEGS. Throughout this presentation, you have heard us frequently refer to district plans. MICIP is focused on the district because the district is ultimately responsible for the continuous improvement of its schools. Funding for schools comes through the district, and the district is responsible for building systems to support the work of the schools. In MICIP, school plans will primarily be subsets of the district plan through a tagging system, where goals, strategies, and activities can be tagged for certain buildings, and a building-based report produced based on that tagging system.
So there really are three components, right, to MICIP. We've talked about the assessing needs part, we've talked about planning, and now we're going to do the fun stuff, which is all about monitoring, evaluating, adjusting. In other words, it's the continuous improvement. And so while the creation of the plan is critical to its successful implementation, it's what comes after the creation of the plan that is the most important. The continuous improvement cycle in practice is not just this one-time event, but a series of repeated cycles that includes not only monitoring, but adjusting as a result of that monitoring. I want to make note, as you look at these slides, that there are dates that are embedded in them. Those dates, those due dates, those reminder dates, are set by districts. They're set by you. Doing the work that you need to do to help our students. Those dates are very, very important based on what your capacity and needs are. So MICIP is intended to make the monitoring as easy as possible, including sending out monitoring reminders based on identified timelines. Monitoring includes both the implementation with fidelity, and that is key. Hence, the hexagon tool comes back to make sure that we are ready. This monitoring process also ensures that. And of course, is it having the impact on students as it was intended? Finally, we come to a point where we need to evaluate. NERN has a tool that will be embedded into MICIP that will help us know how to move forward with our current plan based on our evaluation of implementation and impact, as well as to identify next steps in the overall continuous improvement process. And, as promised, rather than being a separate requirement, program evaluation is built into the system. And this is a screenshot to show you what the platform may look like. So in summary, we believe that there are a number of benefits to this approach to continuous improvement. There will be one streamlined comprehensive needs assessment that will serve multiple purposes. The consolidated application and other supporting documentation will be partially pre-populated, making a plan development easier for districts. Data that are available are displayed through the platform, eliminating the needs for district staff to go searching for data from multiple sources. No more data mining. Program evaluation is embedded into the MICIP platform, making program requirements simpler. Application, data, and resources, such as the strategy bank, will be integrated into the platform to be used in MICIP. Duplication of efforts is reduced because information that is entered once can be used multiple times, and certain compliance documents that were once submitted as isolated reports are now integrated into the process. Since this is a continuous improvement process, while building the initial plan may take some additional time, the primary focus of each year will be monitoring and adjusting the existing plan rather than starting over from scratch, and this will also save time. All of these benefits in time saving and efficiency are certainly worthy. However, in the end, what will matter most is whether we see the results for our students. And that is what MICIP is really all about. Sorry about that, I was a little slow. So we're just going to review those benefits just one more time. So we'd like to take a few minutes for you to reflect on these thoughts based on what we've learned about mindset, process, and reflect with your partners at your table on this question. How might engaging with these ideas help us get ready for full implementation of MICIP? Take a few minutes, please, to discuss that with your table partners.
So, what is our MICIP rollout plan? As we've mentioned already, the department's goal is to have the MICIP platform functional by the spring of 2021, with a limited rollout in the new system starting in fall 2020. In the meantime, all entities using or supporting this process, schools, districts, ISD and ESAs, and the Department of Education, will be engaged in professional learning regarding the mindset shifts and the processes. And eventually, beginning in fall 2020, they will also learn about the requirements of the platform itself. There will be multiple opportunities for professional learning related to MICIP using a variety of formats, including face-to-face, webinars, and modules. You see some of them listed on this screen, including a number at this conference. So you see this afternoon there are 4 sessions specifically related to the ideas of MICIP. There will also be many other supports, including an extensive user guide to accompany MICIP, as well as supports through ISD ESAs, as well as through the Department of Education. The MICIP website is also the go-to place for information about MICIP. There you will find the latest information as well as a dedicated place for professional learning where you will be able to find resources as they are developed. You can currently find a one-page overview of MICIP, and there will soon be a document describing the features of MICIP Release 1. And as mentioned earlier, there is an extensive PowerPoint of the mindset and overview if you haven't seen it. You can also feel free to contact Terry or myself, and also, again, to submit questions or comments, please use the Slido app, and you can do that throughout the conference, not just during this session. So we thank you for your participation today. Hopefully this gave you a better high-level sense of what MICIP is all about and what you can expect in the future. In the few minutes that are left before lunch, we have asked your regional consultants as well as your MyCSI regional representatives to facilitate a conversation about a regional approach to MICIP and how might you work together as a region to support learning about and eventually the implementation of MICIP. So at this point, regional consultants, if you'd like to come forward to facilitate your conversation. Also, while they're doing so, we found on the ground a parking ticket for the North Grand parking ramp. If you don't have yours, feel free to check in with us after this presentation.